Hello, I am Paul Basu from SOAS, University of London. My presentation is not concerned with colonial film as such, but rather with film as a medium or a method for interrogating and intervening in the colonial archive. My discussion will focus on some of our own experiments with film and filmic grammar in the Entanglements project. This has been a sustained programme of interrogation and intervention in a particular anthropological archive, one assembled through a series of surveys in West Africa in the early 20th century, surveys conducted by Britain's first government anthropologist, Northcote Thomas, and therefore unequivocally entangled in the colonial project. Over the last few years, we have been using various methods to explore what we term the decolonial affordances of this colonial archive. This links, of course, to the broader theme of the festival conference, creative engagement with crisis, and the renewed crisis for museums, archives, universities, learned societies, and other institutions, as they are called out to demonstrate how they are addressing their colonial inheritances. More specifically, what does anthropology, as a discipline entangled in colonialism and these various institutional contexts, do with its past, including the legacies of colonial-era projects materialised in artefact collections, photographs, sound recordings, moving image, as well as text? What is the place of creative engagement in this crisis of history, of representation, of ownership, of control, of voice? And here I'm particularly interested in thinking about this question of voice, of missing voices, of the silence of colonial anthropological photographs. The critique of archival bias, and in particular whose voices or perspectives are present in the archive and whose are absent or excluded, is of course well established. The silencing of others is an act of violence, but we should also remember that silence can be an act of resistance. Reversing the view of silence as oppression and exclusion, silence may be an expression of agency, of refusal to comply with the interrogatory demands of the colonial anthropologist, for instance. There are other ways in which silence may invoke not absence, but presence in the archive. As Rodney Carter argues, silence implies voice. It does not equate with muteness. What is important is how we attend to these silences. In a similar vein, Tina Kampt has proposed that photographs are not mute at all, and that we need to open ourselves up as viewers to the other ways that images touch us, make contact with us, and resonate with us. We need to listen to images. I'll come back to Kampt's proposition, but first I want to briefly introduce the archive that we've been experimenting with. So over the last few years, we've been engaging with this quite remarkable archive assembled by this man here, Northcote Thomas. And as I mentioned earlier, he was the first government anthropologist to be appointed by the British Colonial Office. And in this capacity, he conducted 4 surveys in West Africa, 3 in what was then the Protectorate of Southern Nigeria, and the last one in Sierra Leone. This is between 1909 and 1915. Of course, there's a huge amount to say about all of this, and please do check out the project website, and particularly the blogs where we've kind of reported on all kinds of things we've been up to in this project. One of the interesting things, though, was the kind of the multimedia nature of the project. He didn't use moving image, but he used all of the other technologies that were really available at that time. He took something like 7,500 photographs, hundreds of sound recordings made on wax cylinder phonograph records. He collected artifacts systematically. He collected botanical specimens. And of course, he made copious amounts of field notes and published numerous reports and academic articles and so on. One of the kind of key initial parts of this project has literally been to reassemble this archive, because these different elements were dispersed to different institutions. This project was not a success from the colonial government's points of view, and this material, soon after it was collected, was effectively dispersed to different institutions and, to all intents and purposes, shelved. And it's been in that kind of dormant state really for over 100 years until this project. This process of reassemblage allows us to rearticulate these different media, and really for the first time since they were produced. So here, for instance, you can see how we can reassociate Thomas's field notes with the photographs, the sound recordings, and the actual objects he collected at a particular event. This is a wrestling festival that Thomas documented in Ottawa, North Edo, in 1909. And interestingly, this links to recent arguments made by Ferrarini and Scaldaferri in their book Sensory Ethnography, where they're talking about this articulation of text, photograph, sound recording in what they call synesthetic montage. We can see in Thomas's work, for instance, precisely this. So where one can reassociate these different media and produce a very powerful kind of document, if you like, very filmic, very cinematic. But as the point is made in sensory ethnography, these are asynchronous rather than the fixed relationship between sound and image in a truly cinematic kind of a way. I mentioned that Thomas took thousands of photographs during the 6 years of his surveys. Around half of these are a particular genre of anthropological image, the physical type portrait. Here you can see some examples in one of the photograph albums from Thomas's surveys. Such photographs have come to epitomise the objectifying violences of anthropology's scientific racism, reducing individuals to specimens of ethnic or tribal types to be assembled, compared and categorised. Examples of these were published in Thomas's official reports, accompanied by captions such as these from the Sierra Leonean report: Susu boy, Limba girl, Karanko man, Timini woman. In fact, Thomas did also record the names of many of those he photographed, and since we have also worked out the location in which each photograph was taken, this has enabled us to revisit these locations, to deposit copies of the photographs with the present-day communities, but also to ask community members about the photographs. Because Thomas recorded names, on many occasions we've been able to identify the descendants of those photographed and reunite them with images of their ancestors. Photo-elicitation, then, is the first method through which we have added voice to the silent images. This is, of course, a familiar method for anthropologists and oral historians, but it is also very interesting to consider the plurality of voices that attends each photograph. These photographs do not have singular meanings. For some, they do epitomise the violences of colonialism. For others, however, they speak of much more intimate histories and connections, and the fact that they were made is a matter of celebration rather than critique, despite the colonial context. What these photographs say, then, depends much upon the proximity and positionality of the voice speaking to the subject photographed. The silence of the photograph invites the viewer to speak. This brings me to our first filmic experiment with voice and the short film Faces Voices, which is being screened as part of the film festival. Here we were interested in eliciting the responses of people of African heritage in London to Thomas's physical type portraits. In the film we juxtaposed the faces of those giving voice to the images with the faces of those they are responding to. We consciously matched the framing of the interviewees to the photographs, simultaneously filming a full face and profile shot, and we also filmed against a cloth background sheet, a little bit like the one Thomas used in the photographs. Again, we were interested in exploring whether other readings of the physical type portraits were possible beyond the colonial critique. Indeed, we found that when they were examined more closely, when we invited respondents to listen to these images, to use Camp's metaphor, they elicited a wide range of responses. The same photograph was often interpreted quite differently by different respondents. As the participants each voice what they perceive in the faces of those photographed, it is the ambiguity of the image that becomes apparent. The inscrutability of the archive acts as a mirror, reflecting back viewers' own dispositions and positionalities.
I just see, it just looks like a statue. It looks like an object. It could be in a museum.
Someone who serves someone that maybe has some authority or has some influence, or is a priest or maybe a local chief.
She looks as though she's somebody important.
Wow. Even though I see a kind of a smile, I kind of want to cry when I see this photo.
I'm thinking that she looks like, I don't know what a mother looks like, but she looks very motherly.
Looks like she's got a lot of responsibilities.
Okay, her face in of itself doesn't look sad, but her eyes look very sad. Not because of what she's doing or where she is, but like something ages ago. Like there's a long, 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 deep sadness.
She's really weary. She's tired. She's fed up. She's resisting in some way, because I believe that she knows there are certain expectations of her in terms of being photographed, and I believe that in her own way she's not playing ball, she's not complying, and if this is one of the ways that she can resist, she's showing some degree of defiance even in her weariness.
What she feels seems very natural, even though the position of the curtain and everything seems very, very staged. But it's almost like she's succumbed to the staging of whatever it is she's supposed to perform in this moment.
I think she's just like, just get on with it. I can't be bothered. Or it's not going to help me in any way, so just do what you want to do.
In contrast to faces, voices, it is interesting to reflect again on Tina Camp's engagement with the discarded cutouts of Ugandan identity photographs not dissimilar to Thomas's physical types, but in which the conventional focus of the image, the face, has been cut out to be attached to identity documents. Camp writes that these images resonate well beyond the frames of the cutout faces. The irreverent, intimate and off-putting forms of disembodiment they stage just below the intended frame of the photo play with difference in ways that defer the meaning of photographic identification and that contest the forms of uniformity, homogeneity and governmentality that identity photos seek to impose on their subjects. Their complexly mundane performances of everyday life telegraph aspirations to dignity and futurity in post-conflict Uganda that register in profound ways in these images. Inspired by Obel Dennis's photographs and Camp's analysis, one might use a similar methodology to listen to Thomas's physical type portraits. What aspirations and concerns for the future do these cutouts express as these people's worlds were turned upside down by colonialism? I want to return, however, to the notions of sonic ethnography and synesthetic montage. As I mentioned earlier, Thomas made extensive use of phonograph recordings in his surveys. In fact, far from being indifferent to the voices of those he was surveying, he was as much a linguist as an anthropologist, and was particularly interested in documenting language in different forms. Along with Daniel Jones, he conducted pioneering work using the recordings to develop methods of analysing and transcribing tone languages such as Igbo, for instance. He also recorded conversations, narratives, songs and proverbs. Many of these recordings contain explicit commentary on colonial contact. To date, however, we have found only one recording, in fact it is only a transcription of a recording, in which we have a first-person narrative from an identified individual for whom we also have a photograph. This is the narrative of Onyeso, the son of the Ezenri, an important figure in Igbo society. His speech also provides a direct commentary on colonialism and its devastating impact on the cosmological order of things. Since the original recording is lost, we've collaborated with Igbo-speaking colleagues who have been able to reconstruct the speech from Thomas's somewhat idiosyncratic phonetic transcriptions. What we wondered if Thomas had recorded the voices of more of those he photographed. What stories would they tell? How would they describe their encounter with the colonial anthropologist? I want to conclude my presentation with another of our filmic experiments with this archive, taking inspiration from filmmakers such as Chin Min Ha and indeed Jean Rouch, who have blurred the line between ethno-fact and ethno-fiction. We've worked with Sierra Leonean and Nigerian storytellers to give voice to other individuals photographed by Thomas. The monologues were partly works of imagination, but they were also based on our archival research. We met Yenkin earlier as one of the faces in the Faces Voices film. From Thomas's photographic register book, we know her name, we know where and when she was photographed. We know that she was the senior wife of the paramount chief. We also know that she was likely to be a senior member of the Women's Sunday or Bondu Society. Listening, above all, to her image, the power in her direct-to-camera gaze. She speaks directly to Thomas. We know Thomas attempted to be initiated into the male Poro Society, and that he had little to say about the Women's Society. We also know that he was a neglectful husband and parent. Yenkin speaks her mind, but she also holds her tongue and refuses to allow her voice to be captured by Thomas's phonograph recorder.
I am Yenkin. I am the first one. I am Bondo. I am the spirit of the women. Mr. Thomas, Pomui, you don't understand. With your white man's gaze, your mustache, your pith helmet, you overlooked our significance. In your register of photographs, against the number 6191, you wrote my name, Yenkin, and added, head wife of Chief Siyebore of Toma, as if that label defines me. Hear me. The eyes of the dancing Sowe are cast down, mouth pursed small. These are our ideals of demure femininity. The blackness of my skin shines like Sowe's. But do you not see that I return your gaze, and my mouth is wide, ready to speak our truths? But I hold my tongue. Mr. Thomas, had it not been for that Jobsworth assistant DC, you would have been initiated into Poro at Yonibana and learned the secret of the men's society. They talk as if they know it all, but they do not know the half of it. Had you ventured into the Bondo bush and glimpsed the secret of our sisterhood, you would not have come out alive. Sowe is our teacher and our guide, but she is a fierce spirit. She would whip you with her switch. We say that the eyes talk. You turned away from my stare in embarrassment, but not before I heard your eyes speak. They spoke of an unhappy man who cared more for his books and notes than for his own wife and daughters.